G'day everyone, and welcome to today's COP28 Climate Series Growing Green Cities featuring the City of Sydney on Gadigal country. My name is Brett. I'm the Infrastructure Group Lead for Esri in Asia Pacific, and I'm really excited to be moderating today's session. Today I'm joined by two very esteemed panellists. The first being Matt Sund, from the City of Sydney. Matt is the Spatial Information Services Manager. G'day Matt, and welcome.
G'day Brett, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, thanks, Matt. And our second panelist is Karen Sweeney, who possibly has the coolest job title in the world, and that is the Urban Forest Manager for the City of Sydney. G'day, Karen. How are you?
G'day, Brett. Well, thanks.
That's good. We'll get into it. But before we do, before I ask our first question, a quick reminder out to the audience. If you have any questions as we move through the conversation, just put them in the chat. We'll either answer them as we go, or we do have a bit of a Q&A session at the end, so we'll try and get to most questions by then. But let's get started. So we'll start with you, Karen. When considering this challenge of urban heat and hotspots, why is the concept of where so important when trying to understand this particular issue?
Well, starting with where, we can look at where we as a city are located. It's our summer here right now, and we're not unique in the fact that we're experiencing some of the hottest temperatures we've ever had. And this heat does not affect everyone in the city the same way. It is really quite different across the city. And part of the solution is planting more trees and increasing greening in key areas. And that's actually quite a low cost in terms of being able to improve the environment. So trees can not only help combat the heat island effects, but they also have a positive effect on our mental and physical health, as well as other really incredible ways that they affect our city, such as reducing air pollution, slowing down stormwater runoff, and really making the city a beautiful place to be. So we're really fortunate to have had some new research for the City of Sydney and Sydney and other regional areas in Australia that specifically quantified the community's numerous physical and mental health benefits, where 30% canopy cover was provided within a 1.6 kilometre area. This research was led by Professor Thomas Astle-Burt, and it reinforced the city's view that measuring canopy cover based on the suburb or the local government area wasn't really the best way to be able to measure that canopy. We found that there's somewhat artificial boundaries. So measuring community access to that canopy cover within that 1.6 kilometre area was a far more important way and metric for us to be able to do that. But then the crucial work comes in to ask where and how many and what kind of trees do we plant, and how do we do this strategically to be efficient and make the impact that we need to do for our residents.
Yeah, Karen, it's so interesting to understand that trees not only address the heat challenge, but also impacts the livability, the sustainability of the city, and just the general well-being of all residents. It really underpins the whole importance of the greening cities concept. So I guess, Matt, this is where you enter the picture. Matt, how did you begin to understand this problem of urban heat from a spatial perspective?
Yeah, so we began by plotting tree canopy, and we calculated the average percentage across our government area. And then a few years later, we measured it again and it had gone up. So we were super happy that our tree policies were working, but we actually didn't know where the change was occurring and where change was really needed or how much canopy was even enough. We had some satellite temperature data, and it showed us that the city was up to 9 degrees warmer than the national park on the exact same day. So clearly we were suffering from some urban heat islands, but we still didn't know why, because that was just at a city block level. We needed higher resolution data to determine exactly where and why. We discovered that heat is mappable. And so the mapping of heat using high resolution aerial imagery allowed us to clearly see that it's the roads and the buildings that are really hot. And you can see those in red and purple here. And the trees and vegetation are cool in green. And we use tools like Swipe so that we can overlay the temperature with aerial imagery, and people are more familiar, and it really helps to tell that story.
Yeah, so 9 degrees warmer than the adjacent national park. I mean, that is a phenomenal difference when you really think about it. It's insane. It really highlights how critical this issue is for cities, particularly Sydney. I think it's incredible to be able to visualize that too.
Yeah, that's right. And 9 degrees was just at a city block level, so it was up to 15 degrees warmer when we looked at it in high resolution too.
Oh, that is amazing. So, Matt, what is the importance of using Esri location intelligence to begin to tackle the issue of urban heat?
Our aim with the technology is really just to visualize where we are now, what we've done to date, and what needs to happen between now and 2050 to reach our goals. And really, with Karen and the team's expertise and their continued what if type of questions, we've been able to develop key maps and visualizations that help guide our efforts. And so, using tools like aerial and thermal imagery here, we can clearly show the relationship between heat and canopy cover. This street over 30% canopy, nice and cool there. And the second image is, pardon me, the second image is less than 20% canopy. And you can see it's much hotter here. There's fewer trees for protection. The roads are really red and hot there. These streets are in the same suburb, so the weather's the same, but the difference between them is striking. People really understand these images. The images showed us we couldn't just give one average figure for an area. We needed to measure and track heat and canopy everywhere. And that's a complicated idea. And so we came up with a fishnet idea. I'm sorry about that. That's a complicated idea. So we came up with a fishnet. By creating a 100 by 100 meter fishnet, we've got 2,500 points across our city where we can conduct this spatial analysis. And at each reference point, we gather the data and we summarize using the 400 meters and the 1,600 meter buffers from the research. And that complex idea of measuring everywhere all at once is now made simple by breaking the problem down into manageable pieces. And I believe this is the elegance of the solution and the power of GIS. And now we've done it, it seems obvious. The technique allowed us to apply the specific health research for Sydney as well to visualise the community's access to canopy cover. And that's based on 30% canopy within a 1.6 kilometre radius. This removed the artificial boundaries like suburbs or precincts that are commonly used to measure canopy and enabled a more equitable and resilient data analysis and mapping. Through our intense spatial analysis of these 2,500 points, we can see exactly where we need to prioritise our efforts, and we can track how that changes over time. We've also made these analysis public via story maps too, so we can show local greening and canopy to our residents, and they can access these maps and visualizations, they can plug in their address, and they can see where they fit into this picture, understanding their canopy and empowering them to call for green canopy equity.
Yeah, I love that detail in the analysis, Matt, and then being able to then send that out to the residents via story map so that they can actually visualize the problem and understand how it's impacting their particular area in the city as well. It provides a great insight. So, Karen, as the owner of this citywide initiative, how could you leverage these analytical, the analysis and the insights provided by Matt's GIS team?
Being able to visualise the difference between our greening and canopy cover is really helping us being smart about reaching our targets. So, building on our previous strategy, we realised that we needed to set portfolio targets based on the three main land use categories. So, that's streets, parks, and private or non council owned property. Each of these have different regulations and stakeholders who influence the provision of canopy cover. So it's quite apparent, what other people need to be able to strive for, whether it's in a street or a park. And it also holds those relevant groups accountable should a portfolio not meet its target. So we're not only looking at these areas that need to be cooled, but we also need to ensure that the urban forest is resilient and sustainable in the long term. So it's about having the right tree in the right place. We developed a new tree species list of over 300 different species, and I identified about 90 different species for planting in our streets that will thrive in the changed climate conditions that are forecast by the year 2050. I think we all appreciate that trees take time to grow, so we need to start making the gradual change in species planted now so that the future generations inherit a healthy canopy cover. But we needed to take a little step further, I guess, and we needed to find the best combination of analysis and visualization to understand and get the most out of the forest that we currently have, whilst also improving and planning on the forest for the future. And so, every time we remove a tree or we plant a tree, we view it as an opportunity to make a difference. And we need to get that right on the individual site or tree level, and then also taking it to the urban forestry level in terms of a cohesive forest overall. So we use those same 2,500 points that, using the fishnet to visualize species diversities in two different ways. The first image shown here is by the count of the current species, or basically how many trees there are within an 800-metre area. But while that's really good for numbers, it doesn't tell us about the size of these trees. So these trees might be really small or young, such as that kind of dark purpley blue patch towards that corner right, where there's just a large number of small trees that have been planted. But we thought we also needed to measure the basal area index, or the current size of the trees within the same 800 buffer area, to see which trees we're relying on the most. So these are the trees that are doing the heavy lifting. They provide the most canopy and the most benefits to our community, and they're the trees that we would miss the most if there was a major pest incursion. And as you can see, there's been quite a change in terms of what was count versus by the size. So we thought that was really good insight, and it was really important for us to be able to explain that to the community about why we may be selecting different trees in different locations in terms of trying to manage that diversity and improve the diversity as we go forward in time. But we also wanted to be able to look, how can we look past and see what our diversity has been? And if we were to model diversity in the future, how would we be able to do that? So we found the Shannon Diversity Index was able to help us look at that past diversity and species diversity in these different areas. So every single time we have those what if questions, we keep going back to Matt's team and asking what we can do. And so by spatially analysing our tree asset management data and the proposed future tree species, we're really able to ensure that the new plants increase our species diversity and reduce the risk of diseases and spreads amongst trees. And then that obviously provides a much greater canopy cover for the future. And that right place, right tree, right place also means the focus on equity tree canopy cover. So how we define our buffer for planting and how we boost our policy to address the areas that need the canopy and greening the most, and make sure we prioritise that for our communities who really need it.
Yeah. What I really appreciate about your story is just the complexity. You think it's not as simple as just going out and planting trees. The biodiversity considerations, the consideration of utilities, the impact on residents and other community facilities. It's actually quite a complex problem. And then to see how you've used those analytics to kind of help, not simplify, but help make smarter decisions. It's really fascinating. I also really love it. It's a collaboration story. You and Matt working together. You've been working together for 15 years. That's a long collaboration. But it's not just you and Matt, it's your teams, other government departments within the City of Sydney, state agencies. It really is a multi-agency effort. And it's a story of collaboration, I guess. Yeah, it's how we should be addressing these kind of
It
issues.
sure is. Yeah, I think I often refer to the tree team, urban forest team, as frequent flyers. So we're often talking with all the different departments within council, all the different stakeholders, whether it's state government, utilities, and everyone has a role to play, because trees really are essential infrastructure. We really can't live without them. So it's important that I think we all collaborate and work well together.
Absolutely. It's a great point, Karen. So, Karen, what's next? What are your future plans around this capability and also the initiative?
Well, we've just finished our major 10-year review of a lot of our different strategy policies, and so right about implementation of the strategies so that we can move the needle in an impactful way. So we need to work out how we can make this planning more accessible to the community to win the hearts and minds of the different stakeholders. As we've mentioned, it really does take that collaboration from everyone to meet these goals. One of our first major projects since the canopy measurement is to progress to the implementation stage of our street tree master plan. We decided to convert our paper-based master plan into an online interactive version. It's been a long-held dream for us who have worked at the city for some period of time, and we really wanted to capitalise on that interactive plans that we've been using. So we realised we needed a smart tool to allow for a range of functions, including the field assessment by the arborists, capturing community feedback in real time, and allowing for the final species selection and reasoning to be undertaken by the management team, who can look at the field assessments, look at what the community is asking for, and work out, what is the best course of action there. And so, of course, we went back knocking to Matt's team and asked them for another major project to see if they could help us with that.
And Matt, Karen must be your number one customer. So Matt, what about you? Where next with ArcGIS?
Yeah, so that street tree master plan, whilst we gathered the feedback from the community using the Survey 123, our arborists went out in the field armed with spatial data like terrain and aspect, soil conditions, street furniture, all the existing species as well. So as they nominated those new trees, we were able to test the diversity of those selections too via the ArcGIS Online Cloud. Using the ArcGIS web maps, as you can see, once in draft, we were able to communicate the street tree master plan to the community, and they could engage with the tree selections for their street. So we had the basic map view such as this, and then we had another view as a dashboard for advanced users where they could log in their address, they could have a look at the different selections for their street, and they could use some of the selections to narrow the filters down as well. And we connected another survey 123 to it as well. So this one you see here, it was linked from the web map. They were able to push a button in the web map. It filled in the street and the trees that they were commenting on. And we really got that targeted feedback exactly about the location and about the specific street using that survey 123. After the street tree master plan was published, our sustainability team have joined in on the fun as well. And so they're installing temperature sensors in the same grid pattern across the city. And we've been able to see more closely how different structures mitigate heat and will identify safe spaces for vulnerable communities to go on hot days. And as we move forward in coming years, we want to continue to measure and monitor the progress of the canopy and visualise that progress to ensure that we're on track and to share those insights and help Karen bring our residents and stakeholders along for the journey too.
Oh, Matt, it sounds like the GIS team in City of Sydney has become quite popular by the sounds of it.
Absolutely. That's the way we like it. We like to play with those tools and get those really good questions from the experts and get stuck in.
That's what it's all about. So we're right at time for audience Q&A. We've got a few questions that have come through. So I'll go ahead and I'll ask Karen and Matt a few of these questions. The first one is around the technique that you use to measure the tree canopy. So what techniques did you use? And also just a follow-on question about what was the resolution of the imagery or the data that you used for the tree canopy?
Yeah, so we first began trying to measure tree canopy with LiDAR data and aerial imagery, and we were able to classify that LiDAR information and detect where the tree canopies were. It's quite an intensive process, but as we've evolved over the years, we've moved to hyperspectral capture. So a special camera takes photography in 11 bands, and it can detect those trees automatically. And the resolution is 30 centimeters, so it's quite high resolution for the tree canopy there.
It is. Yeah, right. Okay, thanks, Matt. And maybe a question for Karen. So how do you ensure age diversity in the future as well as species diversity when planning a lot of the new tree plantings?
Oh, that's a good question. We haven't shared, we've got similar maps in terms of our age diversity. And so we do plan that and spread that out. And what we look at a lot is the location of aged trees. So we try and have a good portion or spread throughout our urban forest. So, certainly no more than, I think we've got 60% mature trees and then 30% semi-established and then 10% of young. And so we're really mindful that we don't remove trees prematurely. Tree removal is still a last resort, but certainly we will try and plan a staged replacement of those trees as they're starting to reach their senescence or their over maturity, and trying to pick a few trees out in different streets so that a whole street doesn't have to be denuded or lose their canopy, as we replace them. So it's kind of a managed approach across the whole city.
Yeah, and I imagine that'd be a delicate subject with a few residents. If they've been there for a long time, a tree becomes part of the family, really.
Yeah, it is. And that's the thing. We really love that the community are attached and love their trees. So, we spend quite a bit of time explaining to people why we're doing it. And we might explain to people that tree removal is coming up and that they can see that we're doing other work. So building that trust and that communications with the residents is vitally important to us.
This is a question I was interested in as well. Does the City of Sydney report your progress on climate initiatives and greening initiatives around the UN SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals? So are you reporting your canopy cover as part of, say, reporting on goal SDG 11?
We've got our Sustainable Sydney 2050 strategy, and so that has particular goals that are relevant to our area. They really align to the UN goals. So that is about that 40% canopy cover with 40% green cover with 27% canopy. But we also measure it based on the community access to green space and a whole range of other environmental targets. So if you're really keen, there's a green report that's just been released, and that really explains every year all of the different greening actions that we work towards, whether it's trees and ecology, but also in terms of water waste. All of that is in our green report.
Right. Okay. Yeah, Esri's doing a lot of interesting work around this too, in trying to build hubs where there's direct action happening at the local level, and how that's kind of aggregating up into state, national government, and then to kind of more broader UN reporting around the SDGs as well. So there's a lot of interesting work around making sure that direct action at the local level's feeding up into a global metric. So yeah, it's very interesting. There's um, yeah, there's one other question that's just come in around canopy trimming around power lines, and is that factored into the canopy distribution, or your mapping as well, or the initiative, the greening initiative?
Yes, I think it's a worldwide problem, unfortunately. So we have got the legacy issues in quite a large part of our local government area, where the overhead power lines do impact our canopy cover. We work closely with utilities, trying to ask them to manage that, so put them into a bundled cable, because that reduces the amount of pruning that's required. But we do take that into consideration, particularly in our street tree master plan. So one of the benefits of moving to this online interactive tool was that we can nominate 5 different species for every single street segment. So that means that we can have a large variety, a smaller variety, trees within the roadway, like in the parking lane, and trees within the median. So it gives us the best flexibility of picking the largest suitable tree for that site, so that we can maximise that canopy cover. What that did mean, though, is that we ended up doing something like 29,000 decisions in terms of the trees to be planted throughout the city, because it was 5 species per street section. So we were decision fatigued at the end of that project. But we're confident that we got it right, because we took the time, knowing that master plan will be in place for another 10 years.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like it's becoming a big data kind of AI machine learning problem. It's talking about that many kind of decisions. That's a lot.
Oh, it's all the little nuances too, because you've also got, the residents who are there saying, well, why can't we have this? And so we have to then look at it and think, well, can they have that? But it all comes down to, a lot of the time, the site conditions. So will the soil support that? Are there overhead wires? Are there all these other things? And we can try and work around to get the best win for us in terms of what we need to provide for the urban forest, but also what the residents and the community are asking for.
Yeah. So Matt, there's a question here that I think you'll be able to answer, is what sort of usage volume have you had on the master plan app in ArcGIS Online?
Yeah, it's not just the master plan app either. The survey 123 that we conducted in the beginning, we got over 500 responses to. So that was tailored exactly to the area and specific to exactly what we wanted them to answer. And that saves Karen and the team having to read that many letters that were written into the Lord Mayor. So you got the targeted feedback. We've created the Street Tree Master Plan as an interactive view for the first time. And even still now, I'm just looking at the usage. People are 50 times a day. People are looking at that plan still now, even though it was released months ago. So it's quite engaging and quite interactive, and it's available, and that saves those people coming to the counter and asking for the paper plan, if you can imagine that. So quite a big saving.
Oh, absolutely. And that buy-in from the community as well is so important. Actually, we do have one question around that, and probably to Karen, or both Matt and Karen. In what ways does that community feedback that you're gathering actually influence the planning around the vegetation management or the planting? How's it actually used?
It's used to inform, almost all of our decisions. So where we can, we're obviously public servants, so we're there to try and provide what our community are asking for. But on the same hand, we're also the professionals that need to be able to match that or provide good justification or reasoning as to why we can or cannot achieve what they're asking for. So we take the community feedback really seriously. And we work with that. It could be a whole range of things. So sometimes people might be wanting some more maintenance on their trees. Some people might be wanting some less maintenance. They don't want their trees touched. There's lots of requests about planting, more native trees or trees to support birds. We have some streets that are very particular in what colour flowering trees that they would like to match their house, whether it's pink flowering or white flowering. We go down to that level. In some instances, we have neighbours who, have totally opposing views that live next to each other. So we work through all those sorts of issues just to try and make the community love and appreciate their trees as much as we do.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it, to have that mechanism that they can put that feedback and their needs, their residential needs, back into your planning and decision making, which I think is fantastic. Yeah. All right. So I think that's the end of the questions. So Matt and Karen, thank you so much for taking us through this initiative and the analytics and everything behind it and the collaborative tools that you've built to inform decision making. It is remarkable, and I think even on behalf of the people in Sydney and globally, thanks for your effort at a local level. It's so important for this whole greening cities concept. It's this type of direct action that Esri wants to support globally, and we want to encourage our attendees today to think about their climate action plans in light of what we've just discussed. We've provided a link to our Esri Climate Action page. It now has a downloadable checklist in there. I think there is 5 brief topics in there, but I think what's most important about this resource is it actually is supplemented by examples from around the world about different local governments, different state governments and national governments, how they're taking direct action to support some of these initiatives around climate action. So once again, Matt and Karen, I can't thank you enough for such a wonderful story, and I hope everyone who's joined us today has really enjoyed it. Thanks again for everyone for joining, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thanks.